The galaxy had learned to be quiet when the Queen spoke. Not silent, never silent, but careful, measured, as if every star, every world, every living thing understood that even sound itself should tread lightly in her presence. Queen Xathryss of the Varelian Dominion ruled from a throne carved from the remnants of conquered civilizations. Not symbolically carved, literally. The curved armrests were smooth bones of extinct titans. The floor beneath her feet was polished obsidian fused with alien metals once used to build temples, cities, and dreams that no longer existed. Her empire spanned nearly a quarter of the known galaxy. Thousands of species lived under her rule. Some thrived. Most endured. A few resisted and vanished. The Queen was ancient, even by Varelian standards. Her kind did not age as others did. They accumulated time the way stars accumulated mass. With each century, she grew sharper, colder, more convinced of her inevitability. She had broken hive minds that thought themselves eternal. She had shattered machine civilizations that calculated victory to the last decimal. She had enslaved warrior cultures that believed death was preferable to submission, only to teach them how long suffering could truly last. So when the reports came about a new species on the fringe of explored space, Queen Xathryss barely lifted her eyes. "Name," she said. The chamber echoed with the subtle clicking of Varelian nobles. Tall, multilimbed figures with shimmering exoskeletons, their bioluminescent crests dim in the Queen's presence. One stepped forward, bowing low. "They call themselves humans, your radiance." The Queen tasted the word. "Humans," she repeated slowly. A faint ripple of amusement passed through the court. Even the name sounded soft. "Fragile." "Origin?" Xathryss asked. "A yellow star system. Third planet. High gravity for their size, unstable climate, frequent natural disasters." Another noble added. "Short-lived. Individual lifespan rarely exceeds a single century." Queen Xathryss leaned back in her throne. "So," she said, "they are brief." "Yes, your radiance." "Divided?" "Constantly." "Violent?" The noble hesitated. "Yes, but also contradictory. They fight among themselves, yet cooperate in strange ways." That made her crest glow faintly. Curiosity, not concern. "What of their technology?" "Primitive by Dominion standards. Faster than light achieved only recently. Crude weaponry. Inefficient ships." The Queen laughed. It was not a loud sound. It didn't need to be. The vibration of her amusement traveled through the chamber, down into the bones of the palace, out into orbit. Servants lowered their eyes. Nobles echoed the sound nervously. "Another spark that thinks itself a flame," she said. "How quaint." She rose from her throne, towering over the court. "Send an envoy," Xathryss commanded. "Let us see how these humans kneel." The first contact did not go as expected. The Varelian envoy arrived above Earth with a fleet that blotted out the stars. Their ships were living constructs, vast, angular organisms fused with metal, glowing with bioreactors and weapon nodes grown rather than built. On Earth, alarms rang. Satellites died in silence. Skies filled with shapes no human language had prepared them to describe. And yet, the humans did not fire. They watched. From underground bunkers, from orbital stations, from cities frozen in fear, humanity stared into the heavens and waited. The message came not as a broadcast, but as a presence. a signal that bypassed language barriers and lodged itself directly into the human mind. You are beneath us. You exist by our allowance. Kneel, and you may serve. There was no threat in the words. No anger. Only certainty. World leaders gathered in emergency assemblies. Generals argued. Scientists pleaded for time. Religious figures spoke of omens and destiny. Panic swelled, then fractured, then settled into something quieter. Defiance. A response was sent. Not a demand. Not a threat. A greeting. We are humanity, the message said. We don't kneel to voices in the sky, but we are willing to talk. On the Varelian flagship, the envoys stared at the translation in disbelief. They refused? One asked. They invited dialogue, another replied, mandibles twitching. The envoy transmitted the response to Queen Xathryss. She laughed again. Talk, she said, savoring the word. As if equals speak. The Dominion did not invade immediately. That was not how Queen Xathryss conquered. First, she observed, Varelian scouts slipped through human space, unseen and unchallenged. They watched humanity from the shadows of asteroid belts and the dark side of moons. They saw cities that burned with light even at night. They saw millions of humans crammed into metal hives called megacities, their lives stacked vertically, chaotic and loud. They saw wars, short, brutal, and strangely restrained compared to the total annihilation the Dominion favored. They saw peace treaties signed, broken, then signed again. They saw art. Music that served no purpose but emotion. Stories told not to instruct, but to feel. Images captured of sunsets, children, lovers, tragedies, moments preserved against time itself. The scouts were unsettled. They invest resources into useless expressions, one reported. Yes, another said. But those expressions seem to strengthen social bonds. Primitive sentimentality. Perhaps. Queen Xathryss reviewed the data personally. Still animals, she concluded. Clever animals. But animals nonetheless. She authorized the next phase. The Dominion did not attack Earth. They attacked everything around it. Human colonies vanished overnight. Trade routes collapsed. Relay stations were destroyed with surgical precision. Planets that had sworn no allegiance to Earth were conquered simply for proximity. It was a lesson. This is how fragile your reach truly is. Humanity protested, threatened, pleaded. Some factions called for surrender. Others called for war. The Queen watched as their debates fractured their unity. See, she told her court, they cannot stand together even when extinction approaches. Then something unexpected happened. A human convoy entered Varelian-controlled space. Unarmed. Its lead vessel transmitted a simple request. We request permission to speak with your queen. The nobles hissed with laughter. They persist, one said. Delusion bordering on madness. Queen Xathryss considered. Bring them to me. The human delegation was small. 5 individuals. No weapons. No armor. Only thin environmental suits adapted for Varelian atmosphere. They stood at the base of the Queen's throne, tiny, fragile things of soft flesh and expressive eyes. One of them stepped forward. A human female, hair streaked with gray, posture straight despite the weight of alien gazes. My name is Ambassador Elena Reyes, she said. I speak for Earth. Queen Xathryss loomed above her. You speak, the Queen said. for a species already broken. Elena did not look away. We speak, she replied, for a species that refuses to disappear quietly. A murmur rippled through the court. The queen's crest flared with amusement. Tell me, human, Xathryss said, leaning closer. Do you know how many species have stood where you stand now? Elena swallowed. I don't. Thousands, the queen said softly. And not one remains. Elena met her gaze. Then maybe, she said, it's time you met a new kind of mistake. The chamber went silent. Queen Xathryss stared at the human for a long moment. Then she laughed harder than she had in centuries. Very well, she said. Let us see how long your defiance lasts. And with that, she dismissed them. As the humans were escorted out, Queen Xathryss turned to her court. Prepare the subjugation fleets, she commanded. I am done playing. She did not notice the way the human ambassador glanced back once, eyes not filled with fear, but resolve. The Varelian war doctrine was simple. You did not crush a species all at once. That was inefficient, wasteful. You applied pressure slowly, methodically, until resistance collapsed under its own weight. You let fear do most of the work. Queen Xathryss had perfected this art over centuries. So when the subjugation fleets moved, they did not descend upon earth in fire and ruin. Instead, they closed like a tightening fist around human space. Outer colonies fell first. Small settlements on marginal worlds, mining outposts, agricultural domes, research stations orbiting quiet stars, went dark without warning. Communications ceased mid-sentence. Supply ships vanished. Navigation beacons were found drifting, shattered as if crushed by immense force. The Dominion ships did not bombard cities. They seized infrastructure. Orbital docks were captured intact. Power grids were overridden. Satellites were repurposed, turned inward to watch the very worlds they once served. On the colony of Haven's Reach, the sky changed color overnight. Human colonists woke to find a vast Varelian vessel hanging above their atmosphere, its living hull pulsing slowly, like a sleeping god. No weapons fired. No message broadcast. Just presence. A reminder. We are here. And you cannot stop us. Panic spread faster than any fleet. On Earth, emergency councils reconvened daily. Arguments grew sharper. Voices grew louder. Every nation, every faction, every ideology believed it had the answer, and none agreed. Some demanded surrender. They haven't destroyed us, one leader argued. That means negotiation is still possible. Others called for immediate war. If we wait, a general shouted, there won't be anything left to defend. And then there were those who said nothing at all. Scientists, engineers, analysts, working in silence as the clock ticked down. Queen Xathryss observed it all. From her throne, she watched human broadcasts intercepted by Dominion intelligence. She watched their leaders argue, their populations protest, their markets crash. They unravel beautifully, she remarked to her court. They are fragile, a noble agreed. Emotion governs their decisions. Yes, the queen said. That will be their undoing. But even as she spoke, reports began to arrive that did not fit the pattern. Human ships were moving. Not in fleets. Not in formations. They were dispersing. Civilian freighters altered course without explanation. Research vessels vanished into unexplored regions. Old, decommissioned military ships were quietly reactivated and sent away from core systems. Scattered flight, a Varelian strategist concluded. They are running. Queen Xathryss nodded. Let them. Panic scatters prey. The first real resistance came from a place the Dominion barely noticed. The moon Callisto, orbiting the gas giant Jupiter, housed a modest human shipyard. Nothing remarkable. No heavy defenses. No strategic value, at least, none the Varelians considered worth immediate attention. When a Dominion patrol arrived to seize it, they expected surrender. Instead, they found the docks empty. Every ship was gone. Before the patrol could report back, the moon itself lit up. Hidden mass drivers, primitive by Dominion standards, but numerous, fired in unison. Slugs of dense metal screamed through space, impacting the patrol vessels at relativistic speeds. 2 Varelian ships were crippled. One was destroyed outright. The patrol withdrew in confusion. Queen Xathryss received the report with mild irritation. An anomaly, she said. They got lucky. Shall we respond with force? A noble asked eagerly. No, the queen replied. Escalation teaches them that defiance earns attention. Ignore it. Fear will return. But fear did not return the way she expected. Instead, stories spread. Whispers first, then rumors, then something dangerously close to hope. Human civilians learned that Callisto still stood, that a Dominion patrol had been damaged, that humans, outmatched, outgunned, had struck back and survived. It wasn't a victory, but it was proof. On Earth, a phrase began circulating on networks the Dominion had not yet fully infiltrated. They bleed. Queen Xathryss dismissed the phrase when she first heard it. All things bleed, she said. It does not make them dangerous. Yet the reports continued. A Dominion logistics hub near Alpha Centauri suffered a catastrophic failure. Its power core sabotaged from within. No signs of forced entry. No survivors to interrogate. A Varelian relay station went offline, its bioneural matrix overloaded by a data stream so chaotic it resembled noise more than code. Human noise. The Queen's strategists struggled to understand it. They do not follow standard patterns, one admitted. Their tactics change constantly. They are improvising, another said, crest dimming with discomfort. Queen Xathryss's patience thinned. Send more fleets, she ordered. Tighten the perimeter. I want no human ship moving without our knowledge. The tightening grip began to choke entire systems. Human refugees flooded core worlds. Resources strained. Old rivalries resurfaced under pressure. Some colonies, isolated and desperate, surrendered to the Dominion in exchange for survival. The Queen approved these surrenders publicly. Wise, she proclaimed, broadcasting her words across conquered systems. Submission preserves life. But the surrendered worlds were not spared hardship. They were stripped of autonomy. Their industries were repurposed. Their populations conscripted into labor. Humanity watched and remembered. On Mars, deep beneath the red soil, a council met that did not appear on any official record. There were no flags, no speeches, no cameras, just people, engineers, pilots, medics, scientists, former soldiers, civilians who had lost families on distant colonies. They did not call themselves a government. They called themselves a coalition. We can't beat them head-on, said a thin man with cybernetic eyes. They outgun us by orders of magnitude. Then we don't fight head-on, replied a woman in a flight jacket, voice steady despite exhaustion. We fight sideways. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. We know our space, another added. Every gravity well, every unstable star, every piece of junk orbiting every rock. A scientist spoke up quietly. They rely on predictability, centralized control. That's their strength and their weakness. The room fell silent. An idea was forming. Not a weapon. A way of thinking. Queen Xathryss sensed the shift before she could define it. The galaxy felt noisy. Not physically. Strategically. Human actions no longer aligned with fear responses. They no longer retreated when pressured. They struck unpredictably, then vanished. Dominion fleets found themselves chasing ghosts, signals that led nowhere, bait that exploded, supply routes that collapsed without explanation. Why do they not simply flee? A noble demanded. Because, another said slowly, they are choosing when to be afraid. The queen's crest flickered. That was not how prey behaved. The breaking point came at the world Kepri 9. A mid-tier Dominion world. Recently conquered. Human population under strict control. Queen Xathryss authorized a demonstration there. Nothing excessive. A public execution of resistance leaders. A reminder broadcast across human space. The humans responded. Not with an attack. With evacuation. Every human on Kepri 9, over 3 million individuals, vanished within 48 hours. No fleet was detected. No mass transport signatures. They simply disappeared. Dominion sensors found empty cities. Power still running. Food still warm on tables. Queen Xathryss stared at the report in silence. Impossible, a noble whispered. They cannot move populations that fast. And yet, the queen said quietly, they did. For the first time since humanity entered her awareness, Queen Xathryss did not laugh. She leaned forward on her throne, claws tightening against ancient bone. Find them, she commanded. The court bowed deeply. But as fleets scattered across the stars, one truth became increasingly clear, unspoken, unwelcome, undeniable. Humanity was no longer reacting. They were planning. And the queen of an empire built on certainty had begun to face something far more dangerous than defiance. She was facing adaptability. Queen Xathryss had conquered empires that spanned centuries. She had erased cultures whose histories stretched back before her own species had learned to shape stone. She had broken beings who could survive the vacuum of space and creatures who could think faster than any human mind. But she had never faced an enemy like this. Because humans did not fight like an empire. They fought like survivors. The Dominion searched for the missing population of Kepri 9 for months. They scanned asteroid belts, nebulae, uninhabited systems. Their sensors probed the dark between stars, confident that nothing of that scale could hide for long. They found nothing. What they did not realize, what their doctrine could not comprehend, was that humanity had not moved as a single mass. They had fractured. Families were separated intentionally. Communities dispersed across dozens of systems. Some vanished into places the Dominion deemed useless. Radiation-blasted worlds, unstable orbits, regions of warped spacetime that made navigation inefficient. Humans did not seek comfort. They sought invisibility. On a cold, airless moon orbiting a dying star, A woman named Mara Vance tightened the seals on her suit and stepped outside a half-buried habitat dome. She was not a soldier. Once, she had been a schoolteacher. Now, she was an engineer by necessity. Above her, the sky shimmered with radiation storms that interfered with Dominion sensors. Below her boots, the moon's fractured crust hid a web of human-made tunnels, temporary, fragile, brilliant in their improvisation. "How's the signal?" a voice crackled in her earpiece. "Still masked," Mara replied. "Their sweeps are passing right over us." "Good," the voice said. "We've got another shipment incoming." Mara exhaled slowly. This moon was not a refuge. It was a node. One of hundreds. Humanity did not build a new capital. They built a network. Small cells, loosely connected. Information passed through encrypted bursts disguised as cosmic background noise. Supplies moved via civilian craft retrofitted to look like debris. Every human became a potential asset. Pilots learned physics they had never cared about before, how to skim gravity wells, how to hide engine signatures inside solar flares. Farmers learned to grow food in conditions that should have been lethal. Artists learned to encode messages inside music, images, stories. The Dominion intercepted some of it. They dismissed most of it. "Disorganized," a strategist reported. "No central command." Queen Xathryss nodded. "Then they will collapse." But collapse never came. Instead, the attacks escalated. Not in size. In precision. A Dominion shipyard orbiting a gas giant lost 3 capital vessels, not to weapons fire, but to catastrophic structural failure. Later analysis revealed microscopic flaws introduced during maintenance. Human hands had been there. A Varelian command node went silent when its living processors experienced synchronized neural death. The cause? A human pathogen, harmless to humans, lethal to Varelian biosystems, introduced through a single captured supply crate. "How did they know?" a noble demanded. "How could they design something so specific?" "They didn't," another replied grimly. "They tested until something worked." That answer unsettled the court. Humans were not precise because they were superior. They were precise because they were stubborn. Queen Xathryss authorized harsher measures. Entire systems were locked down. Travel restricted. Surveillance increased. Punitive strikes carried out against suspected resistance worlds. And yet, with every act of oppression, the resistance grew smarter. Human cells did not mourn publicly. They adapted privately. When Dominion sensors improved, humans changed frequencies. When patrol routes shifted, humans learned the gaps. When Varelian counterintelligence caught one cell, 3 others went silent and changed names. "You cannot cut a river by striking the water," a human strategist said during a rare intercell briefing. "You change the land." The moment that truly altered the war came from a single human ship. It was old. So old that its hull plating was a patchwork of repairs and retrofits. Its engines were inefficient. Its weapons obsolete. The Dominion identified it as a relic, a museum piece accidentally launched into a war zone. They let it pass. That ship's name was Endurance. It entered the heart of Dominion-controlled space carrying no weapons. Only data. Captain Jonah Hale stood on its bridge, hands resting lightly on the console. Around him, a crew of 12, pilots, engineers, analysts, worked in near silence. "Jump in 10, the navigator said. "We won't get a second chance," the engineer muttered. Jonah nodded. We won't need one. They were not there to destroy anything. They were there to show something. When Endurance emerged near a major Dominion hub, it broadcast a signal on every frequency simultaneously. Not a threat. A story. Footage of human worlds before the invasion. Children laughing under blue skies. Music played in open air. Families gathered around tables. Cities glowing with life. Then footage after. Empty streets. Burned colonies. Refugee ships packed beyond capacity. And finally, messages. From humans. We are still here. You did not erase us. You do not own our future. The broadcast lasted exactly 4 minutes. Then Endurance self-destructed, its reactor overloaded to erase all trace of its crew. The Dominion tried to suppress the transmission. They failed. Because it wasn't just sent outward. It was sent inward. Into the minds of enslaved species. Conscripted laborers. Even Dominion citizens who had never questioned the Queen's rule. For the first time, they saw humans not as prey, but as people. Unrest followed. Minor at first. Then undeniable. Labor slowdowns. Deliberate inefficiencies. Sabotage that looked like accidents. Queen Xathryss convened her inner council. They are infecting our empire, one noble hissed. Not with weapons, but with ideas. The Queen's mandibles tightened. Ideas are fragile, she said. They break under force. But even as she spoke, another report arrived. A Dominion-aligned species had refused an order. A small refusal. A delay. But it was the first crack. On Earth, scarred, blockaded, but unbroken, Ambassador Elena Reyes stood before a camera for the first time in months. Her hair was more gray now. Her face lined with exhaustion. But her eyes were steady. We don't know how this ends, she said. We don't know if we survive. She paused. But we know who we are. She looked directly into the lens. We are the species that adapts. That remembers. That stands back up. Across human space, people watched in silence. Across Dominion space, others watched too. And Queen Xathryss, immortal, ancient, unchallenged for lifetimes, felt something unfamiliar coil in her core. Not fear. Recognition. Humanity was not trying to win the war. They were trying to change what winning meant. And for the first time, the Queen began to understand the terrible truth. You could conquer worlds. You could enslave bodies. But a species that defined itself by resilience could not be ruled the way all others had been. Queen Xathryss had always believed that empires fell loudly. In fire. In rebellion. In grand, violent finales that justified conquest as necessity. She was wrong. The Varelian Dominion did not begin to collapse with an explosion. It began with hesitation. The first hesitation occurred at a border outpost orbiting a blue-white star. A Dominion commander received orders to sterilize a human evacuation corridor, an unarmed stream of civilian vessels fleeing a dying colony. The order was routine, the logic flawless. Remove the population, remove the resistance. The commander delayed. Only by minutes. But minutes were enough. Enough for the human ships to scatter into the star's radiation shadow. Enough for them to vanish. When questioned, the commander cited a sensor error. The explanation was accepted. But hesitation had entered the system. Across the Dominion, similar delays followed. Weapons checks took longer. Patrol routes were altered. For efficiency, some human cells slipped through gaps that should not have existed. Queen Xathryss noticed. She summoned her high strategist, a being grown for calculation, its mind linked directly to Dominion data streams. "Explain," the Queen commanded. The strategist hesitated. "Your Radiance," it said slowly, "the probability of total human suppression has decreased." Xathryss's crest flared sharply. "By how much?" The strategist paused again. "By definition." Silence filled the chamber. "Clarify," the Queen said, her voice dangerously calm. "The humans are no longer pursuing survival alone," the strategist replied. "They are influencing non-human variables. Morale, loyalty, cultural perception." The Queen's claws dug into her throne. "They are changing the board," she whispered. The breaking point came at the world of Xathryss Prime, a core Dominion planet, heavily fortified, symbolically important, a jewel in the Queen's crown. Human intelligence identified it not as a military target, but as a narrative one. Xathryss Prime housed billions of non-human citizens, species conquered generations ago, raised under Dominion rule, taught that resistance was futile and individuality dangerous. Humanity did not attack the planet. They sent help. A fleet of small, unarmed vessels emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the system. They did not fire. They did not threaten. They broadcast medical supplies, engineering schematics, food cultivation techniques adaptable to Xathryss's harsh environment, and messages. "We don't know your names," the message said. "We don't know your faces. But we know what it's like to be told your future is not yours." The Dominion tried to block the transmission. Too late. The message spread through underground channels, shared, copied, whispered. For the first time in centuries, citizens of Xathryss Prime asked a forbidden question: what if the Queen can be wrong? Unrest followed, not violent, but persistent. Workers stopped reporting to shifts. Children asked questions their teachers could not answer. Old songs, pre-conquest songs, were sung again, softly, behind closed doors. Queen Xathryss ordered a crackdown. Troops marched. Arrests were made. Executions carried out. But fear no longer moved in one direction. The enforcers hesitated. The citizens endured. And the humans watched. The Queen demanded a final solution. "End this," she commanded her council. "I want Earth burned. I want their home erased." The order rippled through the Dominion. And stopped. Not because it was refused. Because no one could guarantee it would work. Human defenses around Earth were layered now. Not in firepower, but in consequence. Every plan to destroy the planet triggered cascading instability across conquered systems. Retaliation not from humans alone, but from allies they had never officially claimed. Species that had watched, learned, waited. Queen Xathryss stood alone in her throne chamber, surrounded by the ghosts of certainty. For the first time in her long reign, the galaxy did not bend automatically to her will. It was then that Ambassador Elena Reyes returned. Not with a fleet, with a single ship. She stood once more before the Queen's throne, older now, slower, but unbowed. "You've lost," the Queen said flatly. Elena shook her head. "No," she replied. "You've learned." The Queen studied her. "What do you want?" Xathryss asked. Elena's answer was simple. "To be left alone." A pause stretched between them. And if I refuse? The queen said. Elena met her gaze. Then this never ends. For the first time in centuries, Queen Xathryss saw her future clearly. Not defeat. Erosion. An empire slowly hollowed out by a species that could not be erased because it refused to become what it fought. The queen turned away. The dominion withdrew. Not everywhere. Not entirely. But enough. Borders shifted. Human space stabilized. Conquered species began asserting autonomy, some peacefully, some not. Queen Xathryss remained on her throne. But she no longer laughed. Years later, historians would debate the moment the Varelian dominion truly fell. Some would point to the sabotage campaigns. Others to the failed invasion plans. A few would name the broadcast from the Endurance. But those who had been there, who had watched it unfold from the inside, knew the truth. The empire fell the moment it encountered a species that could be mocked, outmatched, and wounded, and still choose compassion over conquest. Still choose unity over fear. Still choose to stand. And for the first time, the galaxy understood what it truly meant to be human. If this story moved you, subscribe StoryVix for more human stories from the stars.